All right. Hello, and welcome everybody to the Common Sense Lab's weekly webinar. Today, we're going to be talking about how we use insights from behavioral economics to create long-term mindsets and increase retirement savings. We'll also spend some time talking about our process for taking behavioral research out of the lab and applying it in the real world. My name is Brad Swain. I'm a behavioral researcher at the Common Sense Lab in San Francisco. Joining us today is fellow behavioral researcher Aaron Nichols from Duke University. In a few minutes, Aaron will share insights about his research on income framing and hourly workers. Also joining us today is Tad Milburn, the CEO and co-founder of Payable.com. Common Sense Lab partnered with Payable earlier this year, and they were one of the first partners to complete an experiment with us in 2016. You'll hear from both of them in a minute, but before we begin, I'd like to take a minute to talk about our goals here at the Common Sense Lab. Common Sense Lab is a financial research lab based out of Duke University. We are supported by generous funding from the MetLife Foundation. Our goal is to create and test interventions to help low and moderate income households increase their financial well-being. We focus our interventions on 5 main categories: improving cash flow management, decreasing expenses, decreasing debt, increasing long-term savings, and increasing short-term savings. To accomplish these goals, we focus our energy on 3 overarching strategies. We partner with fintech companies, credit unions, financial institutions, and nonprofits and run experiments to help improve their products and help their low to middle income customers make better financial decisions. Second, we create products from the ground up that help low to moderate income people manage their money. Finally, we share our findings with other organizations, researchers, and thought leaders who share in our goal of increasing the financial well-being of others. That's all of you guys. Now that you know a little bit more about us, let's get started by taking a little bit of time to talk about our research and show how we plan to use it to increase retirement savings. To set the stage and talk about his research, I'd like to introduce Aaron Nichols. As mentioned before, Aaron is a behavioral researcher at Duke University, where he conducts research on income framing and retirement savings with Dan Ariely. Take it away, Aaron.
Thank you for the introduction, Brad. As Brad mentioned, I am a researcher with Duke University, and I am particularly interested in financial decision-making and retirement savings. So before we begin to dive into the research, let's set the stage, and let's talk about the current state of retirement savings in the U.S. So as you might know, or you may have heard, we are currently in what has been dubbed a retirement savings crisis. 40 million U.S. households, about 45%, do not have any retirement assets whatsoever. More, 4 out of 5 households had less than 1 times their income in retirement savings, where 8 times is the goal. And this has been provided to us by the National Institute on Retirement Security. So now that we know about what the state of retirement savings is and that it's not very good at the moment, why aren't people saving? Well, there are many reasons. One obvious reason is if you lack extra income, you might not have the ability. Without extra income, you cannot save. Also, there's a lack of knowledge sometimes. If you do not know about the financial products that are available or the benefits of retirement saving, you won't do it. There's procrastination, which we are all familiar with, and that is our tendency to put off chores or tasks that we could do today for another time in the future, often never getting around to doing it. Then there's the idea of discounting, where we put a higher value on goods or services in the present over the same goods or services in the future. And then lastly, there's this idea called construal level theory. And construal level theory talks about how we focus a lot on the present, and we think about the present much differently than we think about the future. To humans, the future is abstract, and we don't think about it enough. On the other hand, we think about the present a lot, and in the present, the situation and the costs are concrete. And So we're going to focus on control level theory as we talk about our research. This was our main focus for our intervention. So now getting back to wage structure and what is going on in the U.S. So saving requires forward thinking. It requires planning for a better tomorrow. And generally speaking, we want people to have a future orientation. We want them to think futurely. Yet, we pay people in hourly wages. According to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, nearly 60% of all wage and salary workers in 2015 were paid hourly. Is this compatible? How does the framing of time and wages affect our preferences for retirement savings? So now that we've discussed the state of retirement savings and the state of employment in the U.S., let's define our research questions. So can income be framed in ways that will increase or decrease preferred rates of saving? Can we link lower savings with hourly or with yearly wages? And if this is the case, what can we do about it? To answer these questions, we at the Common Sense Lab conducted a series of controlled experiments. So now I'm going to walk you through these controlled experiments, and in study one, this provides the basic design for the rest of the study. So in study one, we explored temporal framing of income, time in income, and investigated how equivalent wages presented dissimilarly in terms of time might impact hypothetical income allocations to savings. So we asked participants to imagine earning either $35 per hour over the next working year or earning $70,000 over the next working year. And these wages are equivalent based on the standard yearly schedule of 2,000 hours. And after they were asked to imagine these wages, they were asked to allocate their income into 7 different categories of expenditure, which were food, housing, transportation, health and wellness, entertainment and leisure, other living expenses, and most importantly, and what we were interested in, 401k and other savings. So what did we find? Well, what we found was very interesting. We found that these allocations to 401k and other savings were being driven by something in a different manner. There was a different preference, a higher preference for allocations to 401k and other savings for people in the yearly frame, in the $70,000 a year frame. So they allocated about 5% more of their income to 401k and other savings. So this was very interesting to us. And we tested for things such as math abilities and also ratings of financial security, and we found that those weren't driving the results there. So then we decided to flip this on its head and introduce information about equivalency. So in study 2, we kept the original $70,000 and $35 an hour condition, but this time we added information for some of the participants, telling them to again imagine $70,000 in a year, but telling them that that's equivalent to $35 an hour, or telling people to imagine earning $35 an hour, and that is equivalent to $70,000 in a year. And what did we find when we did that, when we introduced this new equivalency information? Well, we found that the equivalency information didn't change preferences whatsoever. People were still being driven by some aspects of the wages, and all of the differences were between hourly and yearly wages. So the hourly and hourly equal yearly were all different than the yearly and yearly equal hourly. So next, we decided to drop the anchors. And if you all are familiar with behavioral economic research, there's this idea of anchoring, and people kind of hold on to this number in their head and will move towards or away from that number. So maybe people were indicating their preferences just based on the fact that 70 is a bigger number than 35. So what we did then is we asked them to just imagine earning a yearly wage over the next working year or an hourly wage over the next working year. What then did we find? Well, so initially we did not actually see the same trend as before when it came to allocations to 401k and other savings. However, what we did find was that yearly and hourly participants had a distinct preference for the type of savings they desired. So again, that category was 401k and other savings. So we also asked them, of this money that you allocated to that category, how much did you want to go to the 401k part of that? And what we found was yearly framed participants had a greater preference for their money in study 3 to go towards the 401k component of savings. So we then decided in study 4 to split that savings category into two, into short-term savings and into long-term savings. And when we ran this experiment, we found that yearly framed participants allocated significantly more money to long-term retirement savings than did hourly framed participants. And while there were these differences in preference for long-term retirement savings, there were no differences in preference for short-term savings. So in conclusion, from these studies, we ran several experiments, and they indicated that the framing of time and wages affects our preferences for long-term retirement savings. And by getting people to stretch their thinking, by thinking more yearly, we can encourage people to save more for retirement. So with these results, we then went to our partners.
Thanks, Aaron. That was great. At around the same time that Aaron was researching how low-income framing impacts the way that people think about their money, the Common Sense Lab was launching its partnership with Payable.com. Before we talk about our partnership, I'd like to introduce Tad Milbert, who, as I mentioned before, is the CEO and co-founder of Payable.com. I'll let him tell you a little bit more about Payable, what they do, and why they decided to partner with us.
Thanks for all that, Brad. So Payable makes it easy for businesses to pay their contractors and handle any related tax forms. As you may have heard, contract work is becoming more and more the normal way of working in the U.S. And what we've built on our platform really helps those workers get paid more transparently, but also more quickly. On top of payments and tax forms, we also offer benefits to these workers that they normally get in a W-2 type job. So we offer healthcare through a partnership with Stride Health, and we offer retirement savings through a partnership with Honest Dollar, which is the focus of the experiment that you might have guessed we did with Common Sense. And so you'll hear about that shortly, but I can't speak highly enough for the Common Sense crew. They have incredible domain expertise, they're extremely rigorous with their data, and they're fun to work with, so you can't ask for much more than that.
Great. Thanks, Tad. Tad is great and has agreed to stick around and answer a few questions at the end of the webinar. So Payable's large population of low to moderate income 1099 workers, small innovative team, and tech-based solution made them an ideal partner for the Common Sense Lab. When we at the Common Sense Lab partner with an organization, our first step is to conduct a behavioral diagnosis of the partner's product. This process primarily involves a full audit of the company's consumer-facing product. From sign-up flow to user interface to marketing, our team of behavioral researchers and designers look for places within the product where we feel we could make a positive impact on our target population while also improving the product for our partners. As part of this diagnosis, we conducted a survey with Payable's users. We discovered that 62% of Payable's users are part-time contractors earning between $6,000 and $20,000 per year, though some earn much more. Many work for multiple contractors, receive payments in a variety of ways, and have extremely variable income. Take a minute to let some of these figures settle in. Many of you listening probably are not 1099 workers or hourly workers. Think about how difficult it is to keep track of your finances, save for the future, make sure you have the correct selected benefit package selected, and you get paid on a regular basis. Now imagine that sometimes you get paid twice a week, other times you go a whole month without getting paid. Your income comes from 3 different sources in 3 different forms. You have no defined benefits package, and your monthly income can range from anywhere between a few $100s and a few $1,000s. Do you think that might make things a little more tricky when saving for the long term? Because we certainly do. I hope that these figures help you appreciate how difficult it can be for these folks to plan for the long term. Once we learned that Payable's users experienced extremely high income volatility and unpredictable pay periods, it became clear that our goal was to help Payable users increase their long-term savings. Fortunately, Payable is interested in becoming a centralized place where 1099 workers can sign up for portable benefits, so our interests are well aligned. Once we decided that increasing long-term savings was our goal, Common Sense sifted through our existing knowledge and brainstormed with our Duke research team to find solutions. It became clear that Payable's users were similar to the people that Aaron was studying, and that this was a perfect opportunity to both test his results outside of the lab and help Payable increase the amount that their users save for retirement. To do this, Payable and Common Sense agreed to run an email campaign encouraging users to sign up for Honest Dollar, Payable's partners that provide portable benefit accounts. Normally, Payable users receive an email every time they get paid, displaying their earnings per job. Payable has fantastic open rates. Who doesn't want to see when they just got paid? And that made our job a lot easier. To test our hypothesis that users would be more likely to save for retirement if they saw their income framed in annual amounts, we proposed an A/B test where users in one condition would see their income framed in annual amounts, while the control condition saw their income framed in the usual per job way. To estimate annual earnings, Payable and Common Sense created an algorithm that projected possible annual earnings based on the user's current work habits and rates of pay. This algorithm allowed us to estimate the annual salary for each user, which was then displayed in condition 1 of the email. These two red boxes highlight the difference between the two conditions. We then sent 4,000 Payable users an email displaying one of the two conditions. To differentiate between people's intentions and to anchor 1099 workers on the idea of saving more, we displayed 6 different possible percentages so that users could indicate how much they would save. This includes the option to save 0%. Surprisingly, a lot of users clicked 0. We aren't sure if this is because users wanted to see where the link was taking them without having to commit, or if they figured out that the ad would just go away if they clicked. But for whatever reason, approximately half of those who clicked the ad told us that they wanted to save 0% for retirement. However, when we look a little closer and exclude the zeros, we see that our experiment actually worked. Approximately 14.5% more people indicated that they would save for retirement in the annual condition, with the bulk of the difference coming from people who indicated that they would save between 12 and 20%. We should note that the framing did not significantly affect how many people clicked the ad, but it did impact what they clicked. With that in mind, let's talk a little bit about implications. Imagine for a second that we could scale up this intervention to the national level. There are about 78 million hourly workers in the United States. That's about 60% of the full-time workforce in the United States. Let's say we could send them all an email. Based on our results, we could increase contributions to or start retirement accounts for 155,000 people, simply by reframing the way that they think about their income. That's about the equivalent of starting a retirement account for every part-time worker in the state of Rhode Island, my home state. Okay, so maybe we can't email every worker in the United States, but there are other ways that we could scale up this approach. One way is to work with organizations who employ 1099 workers, freelancers, and other hourly workers, and encourage them to frame their payments in annual terms. Common Sense Lab plans to do just that in the future. But why stop there? Might providing frequent reminders of annual earnings encourage a long-term mindset in general? Could we put this information on everyone's paycheck? What if your bank was to estimate your annual income and show you every time that you logged on? If nothing else, companies who offer retirement products would do well to use this information to encourage a long-term mindset when signing up new customers. The other time that people naturally are reminded of their annual salary is in April, when they fill out their tax forms. Might appeals to sign up for retirement accounts at a time when annual income is salient result in more people opening or contributing to retirement accounts? We could even combine this appeal with a prompt to save their tax returns, since a number of studies have shown that people are more likely to save windfalls than they are to make regular contributions to savings. Okay, that just about wraps it up for us. To review, we showed that framing income in annual terms increases long-term thinking and encourages savings, particularly among hourly workers with variable income. We partnered with Payable, a company who helps 1099 workers get paid, and discovered that their customers have variable incomes and would benefit from long-term savings. We then tested the income framing hypothesis on Payable's users and discovered that the annual framing did increase the likelihood that people would save more for retirement. Finally, we are sharing our findings and looking for new places to apply our research and help low to middle income Americans make better financial decisions in the future. With that, we want to thank you all for joining us. Just a reminder that these slides will be available on our website, so if you'd like to review them or share them with a friend, please visit us at commonsenselab.org. We now have plenty of time for questions. Both Aaron and Tad are still around. Please type any questions that you have in the chat box, and we'll do our best to address them in the time we have left. Thanks a lot. Just a moment while we sort out our questions. Okay, so we've got a few questions here. One of them is about saving and retirement interventions outside of the United States. I think that Aaron has worked with Dan on some solutions like this, so I'm going to let Aaron answer that question.
Thank you, Brad. As Brad mentioned, someone has asked us about what sort of interventions are going on and being tested in other countries. Most of the retirement savings research has been focused on the U.S. And particularly around retirement savings in the workplace. But we here at the Center for Advanced Hindsight at Duke University and the Common Sense Lab, we've been involved in some very interesting research. And Dan has led a project in Kenya where they actually were trying to increase savings through mobile reminders, through text message reminders. So in Kenya, it's very popular to send money over the phone. And with this app, they came up with different treatment conditions. And it was very interesting. They had texts being sent framed as being from your kid, or text being sent just to remind you at the beginning of the week, at the end of the week. They provided matching incentives. The match was either 10% or 20%. But most interestingly, they had this condition where they gave everybody a coin, and on the coin there were markings that you would make for each week that you saved. And they actually used a knife to scratch off that mark each time that they saved. And what they found was that the tangible tracking object, the coin, actually led to the greatest overall amount of savings, more so than matching even. So although research is primarily focused in the US when it comes to retirement savings, there are some really interesting ways that saving is being investigated and researched in other developing countries.
Great, thanks, Aaron. We've got another question about whether our results generalize to low-income folks. And I think the answer is absolutely. Primarily, we focus our interventions on low-income individuals, and the majority, I think 68%, 67% of the people that we did this experiment with when we worked with Payable were people who made under $25,000 a year, and it does look like the results are also correlated with income. So people who earn more also are more interested in contributing to retirement, but they certainly have an effect on low-income people as well.
Great. So we also got another question asking if we've considered ways to increase thinking even longer than a year. For instance, asking people how old they'll be in 5 years before asking them what to save. And so the answer is yes, that we have considered thinking about stretching time even farther. Initially, when we were probing this question, we were having people think backwards 10 years and then think forwards 10 years. And while we were trying to pin down this effect that we were seeing, we were led to construal level theory and time. But that is also an interesting question in the way that it's framed. Ask people how old they'll be in 5 years. We also have some interesting research going on here at the lab about perceived age and spending habits around how old you think you are, or how old you feel you are, and if we can kind of play with that based on what sorts of questions we ask and in the way that we ask them. And I think that that is also a topic that we are interested in right now as well, thinking about how people think about their age and how that affects their savings and spending preferences.
Great. So I have a question here about short-term savings. So retirement, we're talking about retirement, which is sort of this long-term, harder to attain goal. And the question is asking if we're working with people to try and have short-term goals. And the answer is absolutely. Rainy day funds or emergency accounts are very high on our priority list. And we find that this is what a lot of low-income people are really interested in having and what we want to encourage them to have. So yeah, we've worked with a number of partners. Digit, which is a savings app that we had I think we'll have a webinar on relatively soon, has worked on creating short-term savings accounts. We're also developing some products that you'll hear about in the future. So this is very much on our radar. I'm not the lead person on those, so I won't go too into it, but definitely check back to Common Sense Lab, and there will be lots of information on short-term savings.
Great. And another question that we got was asking if we would predict noticeable differences in people's behaviors given by local cultures. So without having gone out to other cultures and done the research or doing the research, I would suspect that there would be noticeable differences, though, between cultures, because different cultures have unique ways of looking at the future. They also have unique ways of describing it, even with language language is very different when it comes to future tense or past tense, or how that is used. And also saving is just incredibly different by culture to culture. Although we are drastically under-saving here in the U.S., places like Australia have gone through periods where they are drastically over-saving, at least from a macroeconomic perspective. So I would say that there would likely be differences in local cultures or worldwide if we ran these tests, and that would be a very interesting thing to follow up on.
Great. We've got 2 more questions, I think, right now. The first is a logistics question. The slides are not up on Common Sense Lab just yet. They will be I think we're going to have recordings available as well once the webinar is done. So check back with us shortly. The other is whether these findings will generalize to health savings accounts. And I think certainly these can generalize to health savings, as do other behavioral interventions. Making any way that we can sort of make those default contributions and recurring contributions, but also it looks like these findings do generalize to any kind of long-term savings, as Aaron suggested.
And just to add on that for a moment, we are actually looking into health savings as well, and doing some very interesting interventions in Africa regarding health savings and mobile health savings wallets. So this is something that we're very interested in as well.
All right. Yeah, not too many more questions rolling in. If anyone has anything for Tad, he's still around. We'll stay on for a few more minutes and see if anyone else has anything they'd like to ask.
I'm still here, but no one be offended if there's, I won't be offended if no one asks a question. That's perfectly okay.
Tad, here's a question for you that just rolled in. They are asking about whether Payable is interested in using behavioral economics in other parts of their business.
Yeah, so we're very interested in using it really throughout the platform. What you're seeing here is actually an example of the very first experiment that we did with Common Sense, and we were able to see its impact. And a couple of good things that came out of that is not just the learning and the results that you saw in the presentation today, but it also forced our product to put a lot of infrastructure in place that allows us to do these experiments more quickly in the future, to measure the results, and to get to statistical significance. So that's a long way of saying this was the first thing we've done. We plan to do a lot more in the future and to bake behavioral economics as much into our platform as possible.
Yeah, Tad, we've got another one here for you. What kind of challenges did you face when you were trying to experiment in real life fintech products?
Yeah, so you're making a change to an important flow in this case. Although we often think of our apps as the apps itself, probably the most used part of our application are these emails that contractors receive when they get paid. Kind of like when you get your paycheck if you're a W-2 employee, right? You see an email that says you got money today, like you're going to open it, you're going to interact with it. And so this was the first time that we were actually interjecting a separate message in there. And we were putting that message actually what we were sort of referred to as above the fold, which was where, someone sees the number of exactly how much money they got paid. So there were questions of, is this going to degrade the experience in any sort of way? And so what we found was that, people responded to the experiment in the email. They clicked the links. I don't think received any complaints across the thousands of emails that were part of this study. So, the trade-off is usually one between, what is the impact on this user experience? And we weren't certain, to be honest, but we decided to go ahead with the experiment, look at the data, and see what happens. And, quite happily, it didn't seem to really have any negative impact on the platform. And it's allowed us to learn things that will be able to have us bake in a positive impact throughout the platform and anything we do related to retirement savings, and it'll form a baseline of any additional things we might do with other types of savings in the future. Thanks.
Great. I will now speak to a few other questions that I just received. So have we worked with any government organizations on this project? So unfortunately we haven't, but that would be the ideal next step and something that we are working towards. We do have a lot of connectivity with local government organizations through Duke University and our projects here in North Carolina. However, we have not yet investigated some of this wage framing research with them, but that would be the ideal next step. And then to answer another question, did we find any correlation between income volatility and propensity to save? So in this current setup of experiments, one of the other ones that we ran looked at job stability. So not quite income volatility, but we asked participants to imagine again those $35,000 or $70,000 in a year, and then we also added in some information telling them that this was either a very stable workplace where they had a 5-year guaranteed contract, or it was an unstable workplace where they could be fired with only 2 weeks' notice. And what we found was, again, there were these persistent differences between the hourly wages and the yearly wages, regardless of stability. And again, we asked them how financially secure they felt with these wages, and they felt less financially secure with the unstable jobs and with the unstable wages, but that didn't impact their propensity to save like the yearly framing did. And the propensity to save issue and income volatility is something, though, that is very interesting as well to us.
Yeah, just to add on to that, with our Payable experiment, we found marginally significant correlation between, and so not quite 0.05, but less than 0.01. So there was some correlation, but it was mostly correlated with the amount of money that people had. Okay, looks like we've gotten through most of it. And
so another question we just received, how durable would this intervention be? So this is something that we are currently working with our partners to see. So the exciting part about this whole process, particularly for me, has been getting the research out of the ivory tower out of the academic bubble and kind of replicating this effect in the public and with our partners. So that is something that we're working with our partners now to do, is to get this intervention out into the real world and see how durable it is. So that is something we are currently looking at.
Okay, I think we've got time for one more question.
And to speak on another question, and this is about control level theory. Are the results that we've presented from control theory, or are there other theories that account for it? So control level theory is very related to other discounting and procrastination theories. It is the best basis for explaining this effect, and also incorporates other aspects of other theories. Although it is likely that this is a complex decision saving. So there are many factors that go into it, but primarily what's going on is that control level theory talks about, to us, the future is very abstract. And when we think about the future, we don't really think about the logistics of the situation. If I asked you to imagine planning a vacation a year from now, your primary concerns would be how fun it is. But if I asked you, on the other hand, to plan the vacation a week from now, you'd be thinking more about the logistical concerns. How do I get there? How much does it cost? So when we think about the future, we think about our desires. And when we think about the present, we think about the costs and more concretely about the situation. So by getting people to think more futurely with their income, we're getting them to kind of align their preferences with their long-term desires. To get back to the answer of that, yes, control level theory does explain these results, but there are many factors that go into control level theory that also help explain the results that we noticed.
Great. That's the end of the questions, and I think probably a good time to call it. Just wanted to thank you all again for tuning in and sticking around and asking great questions. Thanks to Aaron and Tad as well for helping us with this webinar, and we hope you'll join us again for our Thursday podcast or webinars after Thanksgiving. Thanks.
Thank you.